Ash was revealed to be a synthetic late in the film. Parker describes him simply as a robot. Even the novelization mentions nothing more. While it describes what's inside Ash, it does not go into any detail about the role of androids in the Alien universe. This isn't unusual for Alien, which was more show than tell. It never explained how interstellar travel worked or showed any visuals how the engines pushed Nostromo through vast space in relatively little time. Although, you can see it depicted in the illustrated story. There's no long-winded dialogue about Mother, the supercomputer. In 1979, there were many science fiction references to supercomputers, especially Star Trek. It's curious how the crew of the Nostromo takes direction from what we call today artificial intelligence with presumed ease and comfort. This was everything not predicted nor wanted in our future. Gene Roddenberry would not approve.
You have brought us down to the level of the machine. Indeed, you have elevated that machine above us.
That's why I was more shocked by the deception of Ash rather than the sudden introduction of unexplained technology. This is something sadly I feel will be lost in the future, if not already. Eavesdropping on the crew, recording their every move in front of cameras while analyzing them for efficiency was above and beyond the norm for the late 1970s. I should have been more intrigued how a robot could, behave, emote like a human being without suspicion. Instead, I was put off how the company would deceive and betray their human crew. Going by memory, I didn't think of robots as ubiquitous and common in the Alien universe then. I took this as a Hail Mary. Maybe not a desperate but extremely determined plan the company took to see Special Order 937 to completion. An expensive, uncommon appliance, risked to operate out in the open under a shadow of mistrust and deception. I can further see this because nowhere in the film do they suspect Ash as anything but human. There were passages in the novelization and film deleted scenes that question what sort of man Ash was or wasn't. Otherwise, if androids were more commonly deployed, we would expect synthetics on every voyage as a science officer. Or at least just come out and be open about it. But they don't. Because in 1979, it wasn't how the Alien universe worked yet. Ash was an example of how far you can take lore by not answering too many questions. Ripley discovers after 57 years, humans and androids live in a more inclusive galaxy. This is where Ripley drops the word android, and Burke responds with another nomenclature, synthetic. Bishop describes himself as an artificial person. We learn of changed universal rules, or how the world works as Ripley does. It's now customary to have a synthetic aboard. There is a wink, nod, or maybe conspiracy, how Ash, an older model, was a little twitchy that led to a few deaths. This is a clever moment. Knowing Burke had already doomed the colonists on LV-426, his little diss was intended to defend himself and past company decisions by minimizing the truth that Ripley and the audience knows. Maybe, in his head, Burke thought Ripley's story about an android gone crazy well before he was born was too fantastical. After all, there's money to be made. This subtle drop at rewriting history has been picked up in some theories. The alternative theory goes that while Ash was a company man, he wasn't a bad robot. However, when Special Order 937 began conflicting with other programs, he went berserk. Could have happened when Ripley pushed him against the wall just a moment after Ash volunteered to give her an explanation. It's also an opportunity to show how aloof Bishop was. In a way, he was justifying his existence and the existence of androids interwoven in everyday society, at least corporate or militarily. Bishop continued reassuring Ripley that he is new and improved, with a behavior inhibitor to regulate any homicidal software glitches. Assigned to the Sulaco, Bishop is a medic, pilot, and technician. One film later, a synthetic does out in the open what Ash did in secret. Alien 3 may have the first example of plugging an android into another computer system or machine. We're seeing a synthetic as they are, a networking device capable of connecting into another and accessing its data. Bishop's voice is only a digital to analog conversion for human understanding. The intrigue of androids in science fiction is having the mechanical creation do the same things as a human would do with their own hands. It's a mimic or replacement to step in front of a keyboard or microscope. Their workflow follows the same patterns, the same steps as a human. Type on a keyboard, wiggle a joystick, or look through a microscope. What changed the lore of synthetics the most was the appearance of Bishop's body double. This was a gratuitous plot twist, for the sake of it, that comes with consequences. What is purposely ambiguous is whether or not the Bishop 2 was human or robot. Theory 1. The second Bishop was a human named Michael Bishop, an employee of Weyland-Yutani. A synthetic designer, he had to be rather important to be sent to Fiorina 161 on short notice just because he was a familiar face. The first and most curious is that Michael Bishop allowed or proposed his likeness on a synthetic. Quite a narcissist, huh? You may be tempted to say the android Bishop, considering his likeness, was reserved for the important missions. However, if you will remember, he was assigned to the Sulaco and the Colonial Marines. Nothing too spectacular. It does have us ask, are all androids modeled after a living employee? Theory 2. Bishop 2 was an android. Designed to deceive, this latest model is equipped with red-colored internal fluids and exhibits spontaneous human emotion. Even the film credits him as Bishop 2. This is more in line with what the company would do. Ripley was already conditioned or experienced to confuse human shills of the company with the robotic ones. If this was true, when was Bishop 2 created? Why would they make a second in his likeness, while Bishop 1 was presently commissioned and in active duty? This propels the idea further that the line of Weyland-Yutani androids comes in a few, select models, and there is an assembly line of lookalikes. In Resurrection, Call was another synth who pretended to be human among the crew. Revealed in the middle of the film as a minor twist, she was described as a second-generation synthetic, an Auton. The story is told that this generation of androids rebelled against their human overlords over unethical human commands in order to protect and save humanity. There were a few unknown number of Autons spread across the galaxy, secret agents who undo the evil plans of company executives made generations earlier. Acknowledging the present-day technology of wireless networks, Resurrection described over-the-air communications with built-in modems. In the future, the 1990s will never die. Call's network ports are still included in her hardware, and like connecting a fiber optic cable, she's able to access the station's security and public address systems. No wonder nobody trusted an Auton. Implied, synths were exclusively a Weyland-Yutani technology, and not reproduced since. Was this the end of the line for synthetics? Prometheus was in the era of Weyland before Yutani. Peter Weyland shows off his new generation of advanced synthetic life. David is most advanced in intelligence, dexterity, and creativity than we've ever seen in the Alien franchise. Yet, Peter Weyland delegates David as a stand-in son pouring tea. The film makes it seem that long before the days of the Nostromo, having an android on interstellar voyages was common and standard operating procedure, although fandom has written stories that second-guessed fast-tracking the David model to missions. Either way, with a replicant aboard, an idol to the human race, standing among the living, no one seemed impressed too much, not even in a room from the scientific community. There are mixed messages about public knowledge and integration of synthetics in society. There are subtle hints, from the general disinterest of the crew, that human passable androids have been around. It's even a joke that Yannick made to Vickers, asking if she was a robot. David was more to Ridley Scott than artificial intelligence in a human-shaped body performing human duties. David was to man what man was to God. And David began questioning not his existence, but the existence of his human overlord. Prometheus exhibits a common problem in later decades' prequels. It builds upon what is already known, regardless when in the universe timeline it was introduced. Along with showing off the latest CGI, everything seems more advanced, more slick. On the one hand, you don't want to explain to the audience what they already know. But on the other, How do you explain objects, technologies, and ideas that disappear later? Covenant is a sequel to a prequel that kicks off with a flashback before the prequel began. And that pretty much sums up how people feel about the film. We return to the origins of David long before Peter Weyland grew so very old. Here is where we were reminded of Ridley Scott's self-importance with Prometheus. Of course, this was decades before the failure of the Prometheus mission, where we begin with the next failed mission, Covenant. Because Michael Fassbender did an amazing job with David, someone thought it would be a wonderful idea to have him return as a totally different character, Walter. Whatever was made with the lore was anyone's guess. Walter was the next generation that was nerfed or dumbed down to mitigate the corporate disaster of Prometheus. We don't know what the company on Earth was told, but they seem to blame everything on David. So we have Alien Covenant, with a crew of colonists with a one-way ticket to a new world to be fruitful and multiply. Some patterns become obvious. An interstellar mission will have an android, and they will look like David that rolled off the same limited run. What a coincidence. Of course, we will see that the reason we have a Walter is to have a body double plot twist. At the cost of diluting the uniqueness of David, it appears that androids do look alike, and it should be easy to spot one. What Ridley Scott does with artificial intelligence goes down a garbage disposal, as it is David that played the Old Testament God, while being something like a Dr. Frankenstein, just more evil and not as funny. For a brief moment, we are made to believe that the egg, the facehugger, the xenomorph, maybe even the Queen herself, was the invention of David all along. Romulus adds much lore and societal nuance. We see how synths are integrated into society, outside of a space mission. Andy the android was salvaged from the junk pile, and took the role of a surrogate brother for Rain. He was designed for mining and safety tasks, menial labor, where prior synthetics were scientists, medics, and pilots. There are hints of Blade Runner philosophy where androids take equal responsibility of work, but are not treated as equals. Because of their logical programming, they are met with distrust if not hostility. Bjorn had a personal history of how an android chose to save many workers over saving his mother. We can presume that there are many synths present on Jackson's star. There may be many reasons the worker class as a whole despises synthetics, either from stealing jobs away or an unspoken belief system that disdains idols in their image, or most likely the synthetic is the company personified, a walking advertisement of indentured servitude and misery, although this staffer does a nice job representing. We learn that certain generations of Android come with a mini drive port to reprogram or re-authenticate units to access certain company assets. Things are a lot easier when you don't need a mobile, I guess. Androids are a rather expensive piece of machinery, and it's interesting they could be discarded. However, when restored, they're really very useful, even a junk model. And is taking a company asset for your own personal use a potential security risk? Oh, wait, but we have Rook. The lore changes a lot to make this member berry. Rook is an irresistible homage to Ian Holm. Screw your canon. When Rook speaks, he validates many of the motivations Ash had.
I can't lie about your chances, but you have my sympathies.
I can't lie to you about your chances. You have my sympathies.
The words are coming out of Rook, but are shared with Ash's robotic soul. Many of his phrases are ripped from Alien, confirming that their personalities and their programming are copies of one another. The other lore-bending consequence is that the likeness of Ash is also not unique. The more Ash, Bishop, or David models there are, the more expected to spot an android posing as human. Eventually, someone is going to catch on. How synths live and work within the alien Earth universe is expanded somewhat. They're not products exclusive to Weyland-Yutani. The Prodigy Corporation has their own models. They're depicted as scientists, legal administrators, and henchmen. Sometimes all three at once. It's unclear how synthetics are integrated into the general population, but are in lockstep with the captains of industry. Until further notice, they may be reserved where money and profit are to be had. Boy Cavalier could only send a single synthetic with his new, untested hybrids on a dangerous mission. Perhaps their numbers are limited. Boy Cavalier told his story, how as a young child developed his own synthetic, taking the place of his father figure. The idea of quietly replacing the living for ulterior motives goes far back. It's not past us that a very young child Cavalier created a robot that violated the 3 laws of robotics. Maybe Asimov does not exist in this universe. Alien Earth introduced new human-augmented idolatry. 3 human guises, synthetics, cyborgs, and hybrids. The hybrids may be described, too simply, as synthetics running software downloaded from the human mind. It is a technology of the Prodigy Corporation, and outside of the alien universe, ran under Weyland-Yutani. It came decades, even centuries before anything remotely close was developed, before its technology disappeared. What makes the cyborg curious is not what we see, but what we don't. Its lore is new and shoehorned into a timeline that has never been seen before or since. Morrow is the lone example of a cyborg that we know of, and is exclusive to Weyland-Yutani. Serving on the Maginot, the series teased that there was an android on board pretending to be human. There was none. This somewhat reinforced the idea that it was not standard operating procedure on Nostromo-type vessels, yet. Although, personally, I have a bone to pick with the alien logic. In Alien, the Nostromo crew were space truckers, who were unknowingly diverted to transport a dangerous organism. It made sense to sneak an inside man, or inside robot in this case. In Alien Earth, it's not a secret the Maginot were transporting highly dangerous organisms. That was their mission.
The specimens are the mission. Period.
Why would they not put in a science-minded synthetic to run the science department? Certainly, one couldn't do any worse. Morrow and his bag of tricks poses a problem if we're trying to unify the entire franchise into a single universe and timeline. The crew of the Nostromo and Sulaco could have used these weapons as well as the poor colonists at Hadley's Hope. But that tends to happen when there is modern CGI to show off, or when a Deus Ex Machina is needed disguised as something shiny and new. Likewise, Morrow's advanced features were at its peak before he left on his mission. Were there any other, more advanced cyborgs since the 65 years had passed? It is a technology, an enhancement with unclear severity on one's emotional health. Morrow has the memories of what it was like to be fully a man, but after the changes, physical and emotional, how much of his humanity was left? But back to the synthetics. It may be a deliberate storytelling decision to see the role of androids through the lens of Prodigy. Kirsch displayed unique autonomy, not seen in a synthetic since David. Kirsch showed more than hints of personal motives, and deliberately withheld uncomfortable truths from his creator. Ash at least was loyal only to the company. His programming justified, if not demanded, deception. Perhaps Kirsch has reinterpreted his directives for a greater endgame, something that was out of reach of humans, even Boy Cavalier. What the future holds for the Prodigy synthetics remains to be seen. Please consider a like, share, or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. This is Mr. G of Synergy. Thanks for watching.